Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Hakem, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, and I am so glad that you're joining us. We have a lot to cover. We're also going to be talking with family court judge from Chemung County, Bryan, a little bit later on in the program. He's coming live into the studio. Looking forward to catching up with him, seeing how things are going. We also, we're going to hear from Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. And we're going to be talking tariffs. But before, let's go to some viewer comments. So glad Big Fox has the news show on before your show. Thank you. Yes, if you have not been tuning in, starting at 5 a.m., there is the Big Fox News leading in to Frankly Speaking. And I am very pleased with it, very glad with it as well that it's on. I think it's a great lead-in to Frankly Speaking. They do a wonderful job, so thank you for that comment. This comment came in yesterday afternoon, and I've got to be honest. I've been thinking about it perhaps too much. The viewer says, "Hi, Frank. If you were one of the reporters moved to the front at Trump's news reports, in the front of the, as we know, they basically went around the White House Correspondents Association and said, we're going to decide who's at these press conferences. So if I was moved to the front and the legacy media was moved to the back, what question would you have for him?" And that is a fantastic question from that viewer. I thought about it extensively, and I don't really have a very solid answer. I know one of the questions, to give you a little background, I did interview then candidate Trump back in 2016 as he and Ted Cruz were still in the primary battle, if you will. And it was still ongoing as New York and Pennsylvania played into the primary. President Trump, then again candidate Trump, called my program unexpectedly. And if you ever find that clip, which I think is online somewhere, you could tell how unexpected it was because I didn't necessarily believe it was him at first. And then, of course, when you listen, you understood the cadence. You were absolutely sure it was him. But having said that, one of the questions that I thought that I asked then that got a very interesting response was, how is running, and I'm paraphrasing, but how is running for president different from your experiences in business? And he essentially said that it's worse, that the people in Washington and the swamp are worse than some of the bad actors he dealt with in the business world. So I guess I kind of thought about that. And if I had to ask, if I had the honor of asking the president a question, it would be something to the extent of what did you learn in your first term that prepared you for this second term with that time off, having 4 years to kind of stew on what happened. What did you learn at that time, and how did you adapt it to be more, to hit the ground running as he has done so far? I would probably word it a little differently, but I guess that would be the question I'd ask, because we've obviously seen a man who has been preparing in 4 years to be president again, whether it's the executive orders, the fast pace of those, whether it's some of the, even with tariffs, decisions that he's made in those 4 years to prepare himself for these upcoming 4 years. I guess that's the best I could think of, but I would pose the question to all the viewers. If you were put up front at the press conferences, what would you ask President Trump? Great question. Thank you, viewer. Okay, before we talk about tariffs, and of course we're going to have to talk about tariffs, I thought we'd start on a very positive note. Out of Ohio, there's a World War II veteran who is soon to turn 104 years old. And you can find this at Fox News. His name's Devin Moore. And he has invited President Donald Trump to attend his birthday party on May the 15th, when he turns 104 years old. He said in a video that has now went viral on TikTok, "I'm going to be 104 in May, and I'm inviting you to my birthday party the 17th. Now, this has already garnered around 700,000 views, and I'm sure that is only going to skyrocket. He was wearing a red MAGA hat. He told the president, "I got to vote for you again, and I hope I get to vote for you some more." Even this gentleman hinting towards a third run for President Trump. Well, I guess technically a fourth run. A third term. Allison Dudley, who's a friend of Moore's family, filmed and uploaded the veteran's message to TikTok. Towards the end of the clip, she made her own pitch to Trump, saying, quote, "He's a World War II veteran, Army Air Corps. You should come and visit him. He wants you here for his birthday." Now, Mr. Moore lives at Danbury Senior Living Facility, just south of Cleveland. The Senior Living Executive Director, Kelly Beckler, spoke highly of Moore, saying, "We are really enjoying having Denver as one of our residents here. We love hearing his stories. He's a great historian and storyteller, and it's a real honor to be able to be a part of this with him. We've been having people from all over call the facility wanting to send him cards and different things." Now, I'm not going to go through his whole life story, but Moore's wish was inspired by his deep patriotism. "It's a wonderful country," he said. "I'm glad God gave us the United States. In my long life, I never dreamed of that happening," about the success of the video. They have a parade, fire trucks, and police cars. It'll be over at Canal Fulton at the Veterans Affairs Club. According to that video, there's thousands of people who know all about it, he added. So inviting the president to his 104th birthday. We're starting on that lighter note this morning. Okay, now let's talk about Liberation Day. We also have after, and we'll be talking about that all morning. We'll give you a little update on it. And then we have some updates from yesterday's program and from the whole week's program. There's quite a few interesting updates and some New York State issues. But President Donald Trump announced reciprocal tariffs during the highly anticipated, quote, "Make America Wealthy Again" event. The president saying, "American steelworkers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen. We have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago, and you are now, but you don't too often. Now it's our turn to prosper, and in doing so, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt. And in all," let me try that again, "and it will all happen very quickly with today's actions. We are finally going to be able to make America great again, greater than ever before. Jobs and factories will come roaring back into our country, and you see it happening already. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we will change them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will not be full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries." Trump pointed to the European Union and explained the U.S. will charge its nation, a 20% tariff compared to its 39% tariffs on the U.S. Japan will see 24% tariffs compared to the 46% the country charges the U.S., while China will be hit with a 30% tariff compared to the 67% it charges the United States. Other nations will face 10% baseline tariffs, the president said. Trump also railed against non-tariff barriers imposed on the U.S. Non-tariff barriers are understood as trade restrictions that limit international trade through means other than tariffs, such as quotas or regulations. Non-tariff barriers imposed by other countries on the U.S. commonly focus on agricultural goods, such as limits on meats and fresh produce the nation can export abroad. Trump saying for decades the United States slashed trade barriers on other countries, while those nations placed massive tariffs on our products and created outrageous non-monetary barriers to decimate our industries. And in many cases, the non-monetary barriers were worse than the monetary ones. They manipulated their currencies, subsidized their exports, stole our intellectual property, imposed exorbitant taxes to disadvantage our products, adopted unfair rules and technical standards, and created filthy pollution havens. He also stated from 1789 to 1913, we were a tariff-backed nation, and the United States was proportionally the wealthiest it had ever been. So wealthy, in fact, that in the 1880s, they established a commission to decide what they were going to do with the vast sums of money they were collecting. We were collecting so much money so fast, we didn't know what to do with it. Isn't that a nice problem to have? He added that if nations complain about the tariffs, they should set up shop in the United States. And my answer is very simple. If they complain, if you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America because there is no tariff. If you build your plant, your production in America, and we've seen companies coming in like we've never seen before. So yesterday was Liberation Day. I would like to hear your thoughts on it. Now, White House Press Secretary Karen Leavitt said April 2nd, 2025 will go down as one of the most important days in modern American history. Our country has been one of the most open economies in the world, and we have the consumer base hands down, the best consumer base. But too many foreign countries have their markets closed to our exports. This is fundamentally unfair. Now, White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro said over the weekend that the new tariffs will generate $600 billion annually for the United States, or $6 trillion during the next decade. So obviously we're learning more about this. The media is painting it as doom and gloom. We're going to give you some examples of that, saying it's going to destroy the economy. These are the same people that, again, that like doing things the way they've always been done. It goes back to why they're so upset about Doge and the cuts being made. They don't mind the waste, fraud, and corruption. They want to keep things done in Washington the way they're always done. So we're not going to go in and read all the numbers. You've undoubtedly learned these numbers by now. Now, there is some pushback from Republicans as well. Not all Republicans, of course. There's also some praise from Republicans. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But the Trump administration's tariff team has been working on structuring the tariffs and negotiating with a number of other countries. The team includes President Trump, of course, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, and National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Leavitt said Tuesday that quite a few countries have reached out to Trump to discuss ways to lower the tariffs. So if you look at it's a base rate of 10%. But China is hit with the highest tariff, 25%. You also have the European Union. Trump has announced a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports, which directly hit the European Union, the U.S.'s largest trading partner, along with 25% tariffs on imported cars, which will affect nations like Germany. The EU said it could impose retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. of up to $28 billion. The U.S. had a trade deficit of $235.6 billion with the European Union in 2024, which Trump has called an atrocity. And you also look at Canada. The White House has taken aim at Canada, which is expected to see more tariffs fired at it Wednesday, and said it has a 300% tariff on American butter and cheese. Essentially, 10% tariffs on almost all imports in what is being called the Declaration of Economic Independence. And again, highlighting the fact that is half of what these countries are charging us. Again, the president calling it Declaration of Economic Independence. Specific reciprocal duties will take effect after midnight on April the 9th, including 20% tariffs on the 27-nation European Union, 24% levies on Japan, and 17% tariffs on Israel, with the rates described as roughly half of the tariff and non-tariff barriers on U.S. goods by the country with which the U.S. had trade deficits. So we could talk more about this. I'm going to give you a little bit of what the media is saying about it as we get warmed up this morning. I know we're already running a little late, but that great question. If you were put towards the front of the White House briefing room, the at those press conferences, what question would you ask Trump? We had someone ask me. I think, again, the only answer I can really come up with is how those 4 years, what you learned in your first term, and how those 4 years of sitting and waiting, what you learned and how it prepared you to be successful in this second term. I would love to hear his thoughts on that, but you could go for something probably more salacious and get better headlines than that, but I just think it would be interesting. We do have other updates, not just on tariffs. We do have some New York State issues, so stay with us. Just getting warmed up on Frankly Speaking here on WIDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. A couple comments from viewers. First off, if these tariffs were in place years ago, Corning Incorporated would not have taken local jobs overseas. The tariffs help curb corporate greed. Thank you very much. Comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Good morning. And congrats on yesterday's anniversary of the extension of your show to 2 hours. Yes, we just celebrated that the other day. Hard to believe that it's been just a little over a year that we went 2 hours. I don't know how we ever did 1 hour. Just a comment regarding the imminent influx of jobs into the United States. I don't think, given how when New York State was under the control of Cuomo and his 12 years of terror against businesses and is still under control of his comrades, it is my belief, unfortunately, that New York State will not benefit from this prosperity. Yes, unfortunately, we talked about this extensively on the program. Businesses, corporations, not only are they not considering New York State, we're not even on their radar. Why? I mean, specifically look at Hochul's Climate Change Super Fund, where they tell businesses in the fossil fuel industry, you did everything right. You followed every procedure that New York State put into play. You went through all the red tape and the bureaucracy, and you did it right for all these years, but now we don't like fossil fuels, so could you give us, what is it, $75 billion? So let's say you're not in the fossil fuel industry, but you're saying, well, we're looking to put our big corporation somewhere, but what if our corporation falls out of fashion? Will the state come back and try to hit us with this huge fee? And the answer, what Hochul shows, is yes. So yes, I would agree with you. I would agree with you that I think New York State, unfortunately, will not even be looked at. Now, of course, CNN put together what world leaders are saying about the tariffs. And of course, they picked people that would say nothing good. The Australian Prime Minister said, for Australia, these tariffs are not unexpected, but let me be clear, they are totally unwarranted. Trump referred to reciprocal tariffs. A reciprocal tariff would be 0, not 10%. The administration tariffs have no basic in logic, and they go against the basis of our two nations' partnerships. I'm not going to read all these. You can imagine where the media has been heading with the tariff conversation, that it's the worse than worst case scenario. That's coming up, or coming from Market Watch. U.S. stock futures and the dollar tumbled after Trump unveiled sweeping tariffs on trading partners that were higher than investors had expected. Well, the investors should have saw it coming. U.S. stock futures and the dollar tumbled on Wednesday after Donald Trump unveiled Liberation Day tariffs that were larger than investors had expected. Again, I'm not going to read every single quote. I don't want to fall into that kind of trap. But Market Watch saying that Trump's tariffs amount to worse than worst case scenario as investors brace for stock market beatdown. Or how about this coming from the Wall Street Journal? Trump's new protectionist age. Blowing up the world trading system has consequences that the president isn't advertising. All details aren't clear as we write this, but Mr. Trump's tariffs look reciprocal in name only. First, he's hitting every nation in the world with a 10% baseline tariff to sell in the U.S. market. For those he calls bad actors, he's adding up the country's tariff rate on U.S. goods plus an arbitrary estimate of the cost of its currency manipulation and non-tariff barriers. He then takes that total number and applies half of that in tariffs on the country's exports to the U.S. Mr. Trump's new tariff onslaught is giving China another opening to use its large market to court American allies. South Korea and Japan are the first targets, but Europe is on China's list. Closer trade ties with China, amid doubts about access to the U.S. market, will make these countries less likely to join the U.S. to impose export controls on technology to China or to ban I got cut off here. This is far from a comprehensive list, but we offer them as food for thought as Mr. Trump builds his new protectionist world. Remaking the world economy has large consequences, and they may not all add up to what Mr. Trump advertises as a new golden age. So keep that in the back of your mind. That's the Wall Street Journal. And remember that. Remember, if these are successful, as Trump is saying, do not expect the Wall Street Journal to retract what they said. We also recognize that Trump has imposed new tariffs on cheap Chinese goods sold by some of these companies like, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce these right, Temu and Shein. Trump argued that the so-called de minimis exception allowed shippers from the People's Republic in Hong Kong to hide illicit substances in packages and products. Quote, these shippers often avoid detection due to administration of the de minimis exemption, claiming that duty-free exports from China play a significant role in the opioid crisis in the United States. Packages subject to de minimis treatment are valued at less than $800. Online Chinese retailers such as Temu and Shein have used the loophole to sell ultra-low-cost items to U.S. consumers and could be hit hard by the new tariff rules. Adam Schiff, if you take your economic and political advice from Adam Schiff, he was on MSNBC's Prime. Of course, he was on MSNBC. And co-host Alicia Menendez said, Senator, as we come on air, the Dow's future is down 8,000 points. We were told by the president it was Liberation Day. Are you feeling liberated? Adam Schiff said, no, I may be liberated from anything in a 401k, as millions of Americans will feel that impact and will be liberated from any chance of having lower prices for things. This is going to be a disaster for our economy. It's going to be a disaster for hardworking families that are going to have to pay more for auto parts or getting their car fixed or, buying groceries or anything else. These other countries, many of whom are our closest allies, are going to retaliate against us. It's just simply going to escalate from here. I talked to farmers out in California and who still haven't recovered the market share that they lost during the first Trump administration from the ill-fated tariffs then. So this is going to be really disastrous. A massive self-inflicted wound on our economy from a president who campaigned on lower prices, but is in fact pushing them through the roof. We've got some other takeaways from this. Run a little bit late. Keep those comments coming in. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, and we're broadcasting proudly from the Hesselson studio on Marcus Street in Corning. Thanks for joining us. Let's go to some viewer comments. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning, Mark. If I could ask Trump one question, it would be, how can you get Hochul out of office? That's a great question, Mark. The question being posed this morning by a viewer asking me if I was put towards the front of the press briefing, you know how they're moving around the seating arrangements, what question I would ask the president. Well, I have turned the question on to you, so feel free to weigh in. What question would you ask President Trump? Comment from a different viewer. To all the naysayers against the tariffs, given that China charges the U.S. a 97% tariff, I think it is, for example, but Trump has only charged them half that, what is wrong with the thought process of said naysayers? The only thing that I can think of is that applies is a fool and his money are soon parted. Thank you very much. Now, yesterday, the Senate passed a resolution on Wednesday aiming to block President Trump from imposing tariffs on Canadian goods. The measure cleared the upper chamber in a 51-48 vote, with a handful of Republicans joining all Democrats in support of the resolution, which seeks to terminate the national emergency on fentanyl smuggling that Trump declared in February and is using it to impose sweeping levies on imports from north of the border. So imagine you not only side with Democrats to pass this, and it's basically just a boilerplate statement. It doesn't really have any impact, but imagine you side with Democrats as a Republican, and you're essentially saying you want to lift the emergency declaration on fentanyl. That's the side you want to be on, just to eliminate tariffs on Canadian goods. Republican Senator Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski voted in favor of passing the measure. The resolution is largely symbolic, as Trump has already indicated that he will never sign it. The measure is also likely to face stiff opposition in the GOP-controlled House. Paul, a co-sponsor of the bill, has said House members will refuse to bring it up for a vote, through trickery. Symbolic or not, I think it's an incredibly important argument, Rand Paul said. Can the president raise taxes without the approval of Congress? Tariffs are taxes. There's two arguments. One is the constitutional argument, but the second argument is an economic argument. Tariffs are just bad. Democrat co-sponsor Senator Tim Kaine said, we don't like government by executive emergency declaration. All right. Now, the White House has explained that exporters will eat most of the tariffs. On Fox Business Network's Kudlow, White House Council of Economic Advisors Chair Stephen Moran said that he believes exporters will end up eating far more than half the cost of tariffs because they're inflexible, and we're flexible, because we can substitute to home production. We can substitute to different countries to import from. They'll eat much more than half because they're inflexible, and we're flexible because we can substitute to home product. We can substitute to different countries to import from. The countries that have built their entire economies around exporting to the American consumer have no substitute. They're inflexible. They will eat the burden of the tax in the long run. And what that means is that they ultimately pay for the burden of the tariff. Now, there are a couple ways that can happen. It can happen through the exchange rate, and part of that played out in 2018, 2019, or they can just lower their selling prices. But one way or another, they'll pay. So, and Treasury Secretary Besnett tells countries not to retaliate. My advice to every country right now is do not retaliate. Sit back, take it in, let's see how it goes. Because if you retaliate, there will be escalation. If you don't retaliate, this is the high water mark. Ooh. Now, notably absent on the list of countries subject to tariffs were Mexico, Canada, Russia, and Belarus. Besnett said the United States doesn't trade with Russia or Belarus because they are sanctioned. All right, now some Republicans, many Republicans, are praising Liberation Day. Representative Tim Moore, Representative Addison McDowell, Senator Rick Scott, Representative Troy Nellis, and Representative Andy Harris were among the Republicans who praised Trump on what was being labeled Liberation Day. President Trump is leveling the playing field for American workers and bringing back Made in America, wrote Tim Moore. My district was hit hard over the years by unfair trade deals. Finally, we have a president who wants to put the American worker first, said Addison McDowell. Senator Rick Scott said, honored to be at the White House with President Trump as we celebrate Liberation Day. The days of the U.S. being taken advantage of by other countries are over. President Trump is making it clear that he will always put American jobs, manufacturing, and our economy first. As Americans, let's stand with him and support one another by buying products made in America. Happy Liberation Day, Nels wrote. We are making America wealthy again. Many saying that we're respected again, being wealthy again. We're going to when I say wrap up this discussion, we can continue to talk about it, and you can feel free to weigh in at any point during the broadcast on it, but I don't want to spend the whole program just on Liberation Day and tariffs. You've heard a lot about it. You studied up on it. You most likely watched the speech from the Rose Garden, so you understand what's going on. But I thought Charles Gasparino had a good point on this, and we're going to bring that up when we come back. Also, I wanted to make one quick announcement because I have yet to... No, I think I mentioned it the other day, but I don't want you to miss out on this. There's a big event coming to our area. And there it is. It's a Veterans Lunch and Benefits Information Session. And that's coming up on April the 10th. And it's right in Irwin. That's at Forest View Gang Mills Fire Department, 125 Forest Drive in Painted Post. You see all the information up on the screen. It's for our veterans. Learn about VA, federal, and local benefits. Family and caretakers are welcome as well, as you see. So again, mark your calendar for all our veteran. I know we have a big veteran viewership. Mark your calendar for the 10th from 11 to 1 for your veterans lunch. Absolutely free, of course. And it's at Forest View Gang Mills Fire Department. All right, we got to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Look at that beautiful view of historic Market Street as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. All right. Charles Gasparino says President Trump and his team are telling top financiers his tariff plan unveiled on Liberation Day is all about playing the long game, getting trading partners who are clearly protectionist to reduce or remove their barriers to U.S. exports in exchange for us doing the same. In the end, they claim, everyone will be happy, including the American public that will be on the receiving end of the long-term gain of economic prosperity. But the Post has learned that top Wall Street execs have been warning the White House and Trump himself in recent days that getting to that long-term gain, while feasible, will not be easy. It could well result in a significant degree of short-term pain, more than just the markets going haywire. It could ignite something known as stagflation of higher prices, i.e. inflation, and lower growth, a possible recession. It's an economic disruption not seen in decades as we upend the global trade ecosystem and play chicken with the rest of the industrialized world over tariffs. They also explained it would be the biggest existential threat to the Trump presidency, something that will make the controversy surrounding Doge look like an afternoon of golf at Mar-a-Lago. Will Trump play that game of chicken? He knows trading partners will respond in kind. U.S. goods will get more expensive overseas and import prices spike. That's where the stagflation comes in. Everyone I know who knows Trump says he's committed to the tariff hammer because he believes in his heart that they will rebuild America, bring back jobs to the Rust Belt. And as he explained in his press conference, the trade deals we'll have crafted with even our allies are so unfair. But you never know what a little stagflation will do to a politician, even one as steadfast as Trump, which is exactly the warning financiers made to the president in recent meetings. The White House was said to be all ears during these meetings as Wall Street executives explained the grim details of the short-term tariff pain. Uncertainty over what Trump would announce has stymied business spending for large swaths of the economy, and it will fall further once the tariffs go into effect. U.S. automakers are readying price hikes because they source much of their parts overseas. Trump announced a 25% tariff on imported autos. As a Wedbush analyst Dan Ives said Wednesday in a note, the concept of a U.S. car maker with parts all from the U.S. is a fictional tale. Tariff policy will cause pure chaos to the global auto industry and will raise prices to the typical U.S. consumer by $5,000 to $10,000 out of the gate. Tariffs will impact farmers because we provide grain overseas into China. Our natural gas exports will be hurt, meaning a slowdown in growth on top of spending cuts businesses already enacted before in preparation of tariff announcements. That's the bad news. But here's what good could happen down the road. Trump's art of the deal making skills will change the protectionist behavior of our trade partners. He wants that stuff to stop. And if they do, he announced that he will reciprocate and things go back to normal. Perhaps even better than normal with new trade deals that don't put U.S. exports at a disadvantage and bring jobs back home. His negotiations with China might be a template. He likes President Xi, and he has reason to bargain with him. But he's enacting 34% tariffs on the country's imports. That is until they agree to make a deal. Trump needs the Chinese to buy other stuff from us. Plus, he wants them to approve his TikTok deal, putting it in U.S. hands, and the sale of Chinese-run ports at the Panama Canal to a U.S. company. The Chinese, meanwhile, need access to our markets. Put all that together, and it sounds like a great place to start talking and make this short-term pain that's coming as short as possible. All right, there you go. We can continue to talk about tariffs if you would like, but we're going to move along because we do have a couple updates that we need to get to. Yesterday. Remember when we brought to you the story about Ithaca College, and there was that issue with a trans athlete yesterday? This may be a signal to Ithaca College that they made a big mistake, as I think it was Mark who said yesterday on the program, a big no-no. The Trump administration has frozen funding to Maine for letting trans athletes in girls' sports. The U.S. Department of Agriculture announced on Wednesday a pause in an ongoing review of federal funding to Maine after the state refused to provide equal opportunities to women and girls in educational programs. The state has refused to comply with President Donald Trump's February executive order to ban trans athletes from girls and women's sports, prompting immense federal pressure. Trump initially vowed to cut federal funding to the state if it refused to comply with the order during a February 20th speech. Now Trump has made good on that promise. USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins said the state must agree to protect female athletes from trans inclusion before funding is restored. Quote, in order to continue to receive taxpayer dollars from USDA, the state of Maine must demonstrate compliance with Title IX, which protects female student athletes from having to compete with or against or having to appear unclothed, before males. In addition, USDA has launched a full review of grants awarded by the Biden administration to the Maine Department of Education. Many of these grants appear to be wasteful, redundant, or otherwise against the priorities of the Trump administration. USDA will not stand for the Biden administration's bloated bureaucracy, and we will instead focus on a department that is a farmer first and without a leftist social agenda. So just a note, as we talked about right down the road at the college, allowing that trans athlete to participate in a rowing competition over the weekend, that may be a signal to them that was, as Mark said, a big no-no. Also on the college campuses, yes, Columbia University students have chained themselves to a gate in protest of Muhammad Khalil's detention by ICE. We've been talking about the anti-Semitism run amok on college campuses. Well, several Columbia University students have chained themselves to a gate to protest Muhammad Khalil's detention by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The students began protesting outside Columbia University's St. Paul's Chapel on Wednesday, demanding that the institution release the names of the trustees who gave Muhammad Khalil's name to ICE. The Columbia Palestine Solidarity Committee wrote on X that we will not leave until our demand is met. Do you remember when there was that student, we talked about it extensively on the program, that went on a hunger strike? I wonder whatever happened to that person. Went on a hunger strike until the war in Gaza ended, and they started complaining after a couple of days that they were hungry. It showed how self-centered these protesters are, because in this case, that protester on the hunger strike, thinking that a war in the Middle East, there would be peace in the Middle East because their tummy hurt because they had not eaten in their hunger strike. So we'll wonder how long they will stay chained. This group will be stay chained to this gate. Free Muhammad Khalil, name the trustees. Jewish students will not leave. They remain chained to the campus gates until Columbia University is held accountable. Who deported Muhammad to ICE? Who reported Muhammad to ICE? Now, a spokesman, and of course, they're wearing masks. Again, that was a part of the deal, and that's why the interim president lost their job. That was part of the deal they struck with Trump, saying that there would be a mask ban, and then the interim president saying to faculty that was always, don't worry. We're just going to trick Trump. I'm paraphrasing. Of course, that came out, and she was ousted. Now, a spokesperson for Columbia University told Fox News Digital that the individuals chained to the gate on campus were removed by the institution's public safety officers after around 2 hours. We are monitoring a disruption at the gate of St. Paul's Chapel involving approximately 4 individuals chained to a gate, which constitutes violations of the rules of university conduct. Individuals combined with a demand for identification but refused to leave the area. The chains were removed by Columbia's public safety, and the individuals were escorted off campus. We will follow the process established in the rules of university conduct for enforcing violations. Our focus is on preserving our core mission to teach, create, and advance knowledge while ensuring a safe campus for our community. All right, so a couple updates there. We are going to talk about that proxy voting when we come back, another update on that. A couple other things we're going to be going through this morning, so stay with us. I'd love to hear your thoughts on tariffs. I'd love to hear your answer. We had a viewer, if you're just joining us, had a viewer yesterday write in saying, if I was asked to be at the press briefing, get to sit up front because they're moving the legacy media back, sit up front, what question would I ask the president? I didn't think anything that great, but I would like to know what those 4 years were like where he was off, and the lesson that he learned from the first 4 years that he is applying today, because he had 4 years to kind of stew on it, to think about it, and I think that's why he's hit the ground running. But I would find that kind of interesting, but I'm sure there's much better answers, so I'm posing the question to you. What would you ask Trump? But we got to take a short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by our friends at Boss Security. Contact them today. They're right in Horseheads. Market Street looking pretty this morning. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. Comment from a viewer regarding tariffs. What the short-sighted Chicken Littles fail to see or mention is how the economies of foreign countries will be detrimentally impacted, and as a result, that they will ultimately work with the president in order to gain access to our large markets. Yes, thank you very much. This is the media, again, looking for any opportunity to attack Trump, to try to demean the Trump agenda, to scare. It's just like when they keep saying Doge is going to go after Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. It's the scare tactics. It's quite predictable, and I have examples of it we're going to get to later on, but it's very predictable that this is the end of the Trump movement. Yes, Republicans won in that special election in Florida, but it's still bad. They got to be scared. MAGA's worried. But first, as an update from yesterday's program, Carol Swain says for over 200 years, Congress has stood as a deliberative body, its members bound by tradition and constitutional duty to assemble in person to debate and vote on the laws that shape our nation. That legacy now hangs in the balance. Representative Anna Paulina Luna has sparked a bitter public feud with some in her own party as she pushes to allow some House members to vote by proxy. It's thrust this critical question into the spotlight. Will Congress uphold its foundational role or erode it under the guise of modern convenience for new parents? Luna, a sitting member of Congress when she welcomed a child in 2023, partnered with Representative Brittany Peterson from Colorado, another new mother, to advocate for a rule change allowing new House parents to delegate their votes to colleagues for 12 weeks postpartum. On its surface, the proposal seems reasonable until we examine its roots. This is not merely about supporting parenthood. It's an attempt to resurrect a COVID-era experiment introduced by then-Speaker Nancy Pelosi in May of 2020 and terminated by House Republicans under Speaker Kevin McCarthy in 2023. What began as a temporary measure morphed into a tool of convenience, threatening the very essence of legislative accountability. For more than 2 centuries, through wars, crisis, and even the Capitol's burning in 1814, the House convened in person. Article 1, Section 4, Clause 2 of the Constitution mandates, quote, the Congress shall assemble at least once in every year. The founders agreed, envisioning a physical gathering to fulfill its duties. The pandemic disrupted the norms, ushering in remote voting that peaked in 2021 with nearly 10% of House tallies cast by proxy that year and 97.8% participation among representatives. Critics, including then Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, condemned the practice as unconstitutional. He ended proxy voting as soon as he took the speakership, a decision that must endure. Proxy voting's pandemic experiment revealed its flaws. Far from being confined to the public health emergency, it ballooned into a catch-all excuse for lawmakers who cited COVID but instead held campaign events, went on vacation, or simply sought to avoid travel. Votes were cast from conferences, cars, and even from a celebrity wedding in France. Stark departures from the measure's intent. If reinstated for new parenthood, what prevents its creep into other categories? Illness, family events, or inclement weather? Congress already meets sparingly. The House convened just 117 days in 2024 and the Senate 154 days. Expanding remote options will further dilute a duty that demands presence, not mere participation. History offers compelling counterpoints. When Senator Tammy Duckworth in 2018 became the first sitting senator to give birth, she brought newborn male to the Senate floor for votes. No proxy needed. Representative Jamie Butler balanced her House service with raising 3 children born during her congressional tenure. These women, like Luna and Peterson themselves, demonstrate how congressional service and parenthood can coexist without jeopardizing the institution's integrity. True, these young mothers faced missed votes and hard choices when they decided to serve, but their examples bolster the case against proxy voting, proving their resilience, not accommodation, has long sustained legislative duty. Reinstating proxy voting for new parents opens a perilous door, one that history suggests will only crack wider. The pandemic proved it. Convenience begets exploitation. Members cast votes from campaign trails and family vacations long after the crisis faded. Congress is not a remote work enterprise. As a bedrock of representation, governance, physical presence is an essential part of a legislator's role, fueling debate and forcing accountability. It's up to Speaker Mike Johnson and his House allies, especially women, to educate the American people about what's at stake. This is not a debate about pro-family policies. It's about whether the institution should be permanently and fundamentally altered for the sake of convenience and flexibility. The founders forged the Constitution through in-person collaboration, not distant proxies. Today's lawmakers should honor that standard. To preserve the soul of our democratic republic, the House must reject the rule change or risk further undercutting its own legitimacy and authority. That is Carolyn Swain. I thought that was a very powerful piece at the New York Post this morning and giving a little bit more background to what we discussed in depth yesterday. Got to take a break. Running just a little late. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back wrapping up hour number 1. Let's read some comments before we head into hour number 2. First off, Lunacy. Do your job. If your husband or relatives will not take care of your baby while you log your vote, then there are plenty of other options available, i.e. take the baby with you. Yes, thank you very much. Ken writes in, I saw the chart of reciprocal tariff rates in comparison to the tariffs other countries put on American goods. What I haven't seen yet is what happens if a country reduces the tariff rate on American goods. Does Trump adjust our tariff on their goods down by the same percentage? Great point, Ken. I have not heard that either. I think this is kind of a wait and see approach to see when they're having the negotiations with other countries. But if anybody else has heard, please pass along. But in all my somewhat extensive research, I mean, reading a lot of different outlets, I have not heard the response to that. So that's a great question. If I hear, I'll pass it along. All right, hour number 1 is in the books. Coming up a little bit later on, we're going to be talking with Chemung County Family Court Judge Bryan Maggs. You won't want to miss that. We have a couple other things we're going to get to at the state level. We're going to hear from Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. The Assembly Republicans held a press conference yesterday, and what they're calling a rejection of the get out of jail free card offered to inmates that we talked about yesterday. So we may even start the next hour with that. As always, keep those comments, keep those waves coming in. What are your thoughts on the tariff? What is your response to the viewer who asked me, but I'm asking you, if you were at the press briefings and you were pushed to the front, the legacy media pushed to the back, and they said, okay, it's your time to question the president. What question would you ask the president of the United States? I would love to hear your thoughts on it. All right, hour number 1 in the books. Hour number 2, mere moments away. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. I meant to go to my intro screen, but hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking on the air. Thank you for joining us this morning. Couple of things to cover. First of all, a comment from a viewer. Trump has said he will match whatever the tariff rate is. Well, I know that it's kind of a blanket 10% tariff rate on most countries, but I guess the question is if it goes down, because they already have a higher percentage on us. So if it goes down, are we lowering from that 10% rate? I think is kind of the question, and one I don't have the answer to. Okay. So yesterday, as I mentioned, I'm trying to find it here. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano and the Assembly Republicans rejected what they're calling a get-out-of-jail-free card. This was at the Capitol. They had a memo that circulated by DOCCS, the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, on Monday. Oh, hey, look, our guest is in. All right. You know what? We're going to play that from Assemblyman Phil Palmisano here in just a little bit, but let's play it right now, as a matter of fact. We're going to go to Phil from that press conference yesterday. Here we go. We'll put Phil up on the screen.
My name is Phil Palmisano. This is my 15th. Our correction system is in complete disarray and chaos. It's the worst I've ever seen. We know, Michael talked about the violence that's going on out in our communities, but there's violence going on in our correctional facilities. Since the passage of the HALT Act, inmate-on-staff assaults are up 76%. Inmate-on-inmate assaults are up 169%, and contraband seizures are up 32%. Last year, I remember the DOCS commissioner saying that we had to close prisons because we had a staffing crisis. Think about that for a minute. We have staffing crises in our hospitals and nursing homes. We don't ask to close those down, do we? What do? You give recruitment bonuses, you give retention bonuses, you treat your staff with respect, make sure they're in a safe and productive working environment. And this year, their answer is to release dangerous inmates early. And just to give you a few examples of some of these crimes that are going to be eligible. Operating as a major trafficker, sex trafficking, use of a child in a sexual performance, criminal sale of a firearm to a minor. That sounds dangerous and violent to me. This governor and our colleagues in the legislature continue to fail to realize that it's their policies that have created this staffing and safety crisis inside our correctional facilities and has jeopardized public safety in the streets. This directive is just the latest example of the incompetence and mismanagement of this administration and how completely out of touch they are, the governor and the legislature, under one-party control. The Democratic pro-criminal policies disguised as reform, but what they have done is created chaos, increased violence inside our correctional facilities, lowered morale, made it a dangerous and unsafe place to work, and has certainly undermined law enforcement. We see it undermine law enforcement out in our streets with their policies, and we see it inside our correctional facilities. From the prison closures, bail, discovery, raise the age, HALT, clean slate, less is more, an unchecked parole board with no crime victim advocates or law enforcement on that parole board, by the way. And then earlier today, they passed the Fair and Timely Parole Act and elder parole, while at the same time, they held our legislation that would repeal the HALT Act and require drug dogs at every correctional facilities to keep people safe. As I said, these policies, their policies, have created this safety and staffing crisis inside our correctional facilities. They continue to ignore it by jeopardizing public safety. So Governor Hochul fired over 2,000 corrections officers. Now here's the visual. She literally locked the door on corrections officers trying to return to work. Some on family leave or workers' comp. Some missed by a few minutes, some went to a different shift. So she locked the door on her corrections officers, and now what is she doing? She's opening the door and letting convicted criminals out early, with no idea how many, when, will this be an ongoing process? Nothing. This governor is literally taking the handcuffs off criminals and putting it on our law enforcement. These dangerous policies continue to put the interests of dangerous criminals over the interests of public safety, crime victims and their family, and law enforcement. Again, shows how completely out of touch they are. This is unacceptable, wrong, and dangerous. It should not be happening.
Thank you to Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. We got to take a short break. Coming up next, our guest, Chemung County Family Court Judge Bryan Maggs. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. And joining us in that studio, we have our good friend Bryan Maggs. Welcome back, Judge.
Hey,
a little
thanks,
different
Frank.
since last time we talked to you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
How's it been going so far?
It's going great.
Yeah.
The staff over at the family court office, all the attorneys, everybody's been extremely helpful, supportive. Day one walking in, it just felt like an old job.
Yeah, I did it. Well, and when we talked about it on the air when you were running, and I'm sure there's things that you expected that you knew it was going to be like, but has there been anything that's been a major surprise?
Not really. The majority of what happens in family court, as you can imagine, is what you'd think about.
Standard, right? Yeah.
Right. So, the only thing that maybe surprises me is the number of. So we do what are called family offense petitions. So if somebody out there has a has a person that is in their life that's a family member and they're committing offenses against them like harassment or assault, things like that. So the only thing that really surprised me is the number of adults, maybe parents, for example, that have adult children that are committing offenses against them.
That's horrible.
Right.
Wow, that's something you don't really hear about and perhaps want to think about. That's interesting. So that's more common than you expected when you first ran.
Yeah, I didn't expect the number of adult family offenses against other adults that are in their lives. It's typical to have, unfortunately, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, get into spats. So you have family offenses against adults. But when you have 75-year-olds, 80-year-olds filing offenses against their 50, 60-year-old child, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's a part of this job that we talked about, and I interviewed all the candidates for Chemung County Family Court Judge, and we talked about this a lot because it is not stressful is not the right word, but a difficult job. I mean, something that you take home with you, I'm sure, very often. That's got to be one of the examples of it. But has that been a kind of a difficult part of this job, thinking of the really heavy decisions you have to make?
I'd say the only. I like to go home and talk to my spouse about. She doesn't really like to hear about anything. So the fact that I don't, get to talk to her about it, but having been at the Department of Social Services, though the cases that are at the Department of Social Services are some of the worst cases out there.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit used to it that way, and then and now, as long as you feel like you're hearing everybody in the courtroom, you are getting the information you need to make a good decision, you don't go home and dwell on it so much. You're thankful for the life that you have, the decisions that you've made, but it's not emotionally difficult for me.
Sure, because I mean, you know what you are doing is right. It's not as if if you were not making the right choice, I'm sure it would sit on you a lot harder. But if you're going in every day with the right intentions, that's got to be kind of an ease on your mind.
It is. It's. If you think about it from the reverse side, you've got attorneys that are representing people who have done some pretty bad things. If that attorney wins, how does that attorney feel about getting a murderer off? And we don't have murderers in our courtroom,
right?
At least not the types of cases I hear.
Right. So I do have to ask this because here it is, April 3rd. Did it feel nice not to have to take petitions out?
It did. It did. Yeah, that was. It's really the time of year, as you know.
Yeah.
Going out petitioning when it's freezing cold and raining.
It was a bad year for it. I went out, of course, because I'm on the Republican committee, and I tried to get as many. It was a tough go this year for me.
Yeah, I think 2024 is a lot better weather-wise.
And people don't want to open their door. I don't want to get into that, but it must have been nice. But we joked during the time, not really joked, we talked about it quite a few times on the air. How many pocket constitutions did you end up giving away, do you think?
Just under 2,000.
Wow. So you have some left over?
I've got about 125 left over.
I was looking at my drawer. I swore I must have taken it home, but I thought that was a great idea. Have you heard from people after the fact talking about it?
Many people.
Yeah.
It was really in the election time frame, in the days and weeks after, leading up to January 1st when I took my oath.
And
a lot of people would talk about it.
Oh, I'm sure. I thought it was a really unique part of it. Now, you have this kind of 100-day window where you're allowed to be, I guess, more open, right, as a judge?
Yeah, so there's what we call a window period. So the time leading up to the primaries and the petitioning, and then for the 6 months following the general election day, so November 5th, so all the way up until May 5th, I can do quasi-political activities the way that a candidate could.
Well, and what's interesting about that is you go from a very busy schedule. We talk about petitions, you're knocking on doors, you're handing out the pocket constitutions, you're going to how many chicken dinners, and you're
Right.
busy the whole time, and you're somewhat political during that time. And then it dries up. That's why I'm so glad that you could be on the program, because here in a very short period, you're back to being, well, I don't even know what the word is, but quiet, I guess.
Yeah, because you can't engage in any political activities. So, for example, one thing that I did, I signed my petitions, for the candidates that I was, trying to help get on the ballot. So I was able to do that.
Okay.
But
In the future, you can't, right?
Well, I can sign petitions.
Oh, you can, okay.
Right, but I can't attend any political activities at which petitioning is happening.
You lucky devil.
I'm going to miss it. I
I
did
know.
for about 20 years. I was involved with the Republican committee in Chemung County. Supported a lot of candidates. I can't donate to campaigns.
Yeah.
So that's the. I like to return favors. So I'm here because I wanted to thank you for having you on the show.
Yeah. You were great. Thank you for being on the show so often. So
and thanking the voters for having the trust to put me in the office. So the post-election window period is really about saying thank you to the people that helped get you there.
it's nice that you have that window to do that.
I agree. I agree.
That they give you a little bit of time, but it is also nice to have a built-in excuse why you can't go to that dinner. I'm saying that. You're not saying that.
I'm not saying that. Yeah.
What did it feel like? Because I don't normally interview judges after an election, just because they're busy, and then the window closes up. What was it like leading up to the election? What did it feel like for you? Because a lot on the line. It was a contested race. There's 3 people running for 2 positions.
Being a presidential year, we figured turnout would be high. There were a lot of, Trump being on the ballot in this area. There was a huge, I'd say, Trump following, and our race for family court judge, elect 2 out of 3 candidates was. It was down the ballot a little bit. We had congressional, we had Senate candidates, so. We were more or less an afterthought. So leading up to the election, it was, did we do enough to just let people know what we're about?
Right.
Because as you get down the ballot, who knows what they're going to do?
Yeah, and I know driving through your neck of the woods, there's signs everywhere. But I will say, and maybe it's just the bubble that I'm here, because the most interviews I had were judges candidates on the program last year. But there was a lot of talk about it.
I think so. There was a good amount in the media, social media especially, your show, and people around town. We didn't have many local elections,
right.
So even though the big talk was the big politics, the local talk was the judge race.
Yeah, it was, because if you think about when you had the assemblyman, you had the state senator, all of these positions were uncontested. So
Right.
you were the only game in town. That's why I interview you guys so often.
Yeah, there weren't even in our neck of the woods. There weren't even very many local races for town and village office.
Yeah. So when you go into election night, what's that feeling of? Did we do enough? Because you couldn't have done much more, right? If you're giving away 2,000, that's just the constitutions. That's not how many times you knocked on doors, got other petitions signed. Did you feel confident going in?
I felt like I could not have done any more physically.
Okay.
There's always more money you could spend.
That's
so
true.
I felt I spent enough, but I would go out every day. I found that for me, the sweet spot of knocking on doors was in the evening. Somewhere between 3:30 to 4 o'clock at the earliest, and up to about 6:30 or 7 o'clock at the latest.
Right.
Even though that's during dinner time, and a couple people would get annoyed. You'd have more efficient use of your time knocking on doors during those times.
Yeah, I found that. I think, right, I've been trying, my bedtime's so different, right? So that evening is kind of tough for me, but when I took out petitions, I found that 3:30 was about as early as you could start, but people, if they were willing to open the door, were friendly.
They were great. Yeah, I had very, very few, probably less than I could count on one hand, of people that were rude
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that people open the door if
And I
they're
went
going to
to
be rude.
thousands of doors.
Yeah.
I kind of had a targeted list of people based on really voting history.
Sure.
Was kind of my strategy.
Sure. So okay, so you're successful, and first day on the job, what's that like? How'd that feel?
Felt great. So my actual first day was January 1st, and we did a swearing-in ceremony. So we had. I grew up in Buffalo, so a lot of my family came from Buffalo.
Oh, that's wonderful.
We broadcast. My dad was in the hospital that day, so he couldn't make it.
Yeah.
but that was great.
Yeah. The swearing-in ceremony, there's something very special about it, isn't it?
Yeah, I invited a bunch of judges. We filled up the courtroom. It was really kind of special.
And they always do it on January 1st. That's kind of probably messes with some people's New Year's Eve.
It was the last time my 4 adult daughters were together.
Oh, yeah.
And so my oldest daughter, she was just in that earthquake in Thailand.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, she's staying there doing work there.
I should be interviewing her, not you.
You should. No, she's a lot better than me.
Yeah. So now you're on the job. What's your day-to-day look like?
So every single day, we're in the courtroom. We have anywhere between, it could be a couple cases on. I do multiple days of hearings every week, but we have a caseload of hundreds of cases. Right off the bat. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that my office does and the clerk's office does to prepare cases as they come into court. Because the last thing you want to do is go in front of a judge who hasn't read anything, doesn't know anything.
Right.
You don't want to look like an idiot, quite frankly.
No, and that's also, that's why you say you can go home and rest easy at night because you do the work.
I do a lot of research into what the parties did, the parents or grandparents or kids, whatever the case may be, before they got there. What has their history been in court? Because I haven't been the judge on their case for years. I read a lot about their cases before they come into court.
And we talked with all the candidates before that there is quite an extensive workload, kind of a little bit of a backlog in some instances. Has that been almost overwhelming?
Well, I'd say not for me. I think the backlog, it really helped getting another full-time judge. Where it hurts is in the clerk's office, all the support staff. So every time we're in court, we have a court clerk that attends court with us. And they don't have enough of those people to help us out. So there's where the backlog is. But we're cleaning it up. There's the goal is to get each case resolved within 6 months of the date that they filed it, that the parties filed it. So there was a bigger backlog than the court system likes, and it takes a little while to clean that up.
Sure.
But we're getting there.
Sure. Now, when you look forward, and we get just a couple of last-minute questions here, but I know you talked about this a little bit during the campaign. What is your goals now that you're in there? Where do you look towards for the future in your full term?
My goal is it's really on an individual case-by-case basis, and it really is to get to the heart of what the problem is between the parties, because nobody's there unless they have a problem. So you figure out what the problem is and then help them solve it. I tell everybody that comes in, it's better if you have some control over what you want in terms of an outcome and try to settle the case. I will make a decision. You may or may not like it. And you may or may not like the settlement that you engage in. So my goal over the term is to have everybody that's in the courtroom feel like they've been heard, even if I don't make a decision that they like.
Is it, what's the word I want to use? What's it like when you're out in public? Because I'm sure there's instances where you run into people that maybe weren't happy with, because family court is a very volatile position.
I'd say ask me in probably 5 years.
Okay, so right now it's a little early.
I do see some people out. But that's another thing. I feel like as long as you treat people with respect and show them that you're hearing what they're saying,
that's true.
They're not going to be too upset with you.
That is true. Before we go, because it's not, we talk about some of the negatives perhaps of the job. Let's talk about something fun. Tell us about the mock trial you're a part of tomorrow.
Well, so my court attorney is the coordinator for the mock trial program in Chemung County, and tomorrow there's a practice court session between the Horseheads and the Corning mock trial teams.
Oh, that's fun.
So she asked me if I wanted to judge it, so I'm going to go up to the Corning High School in my robe and hear these two. So the Corning team is is coached by Drenald Bakari,
Oh, yeah,
a
of
local
course.
attorney.
Yeah, of course.
And the Horseheads team is coached by John Brennan, our public advocate.
Oh, yeah.
So they've been for many months. For a short time, I was the coach of, this is a couple of years ago, the Elmira Heights team.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have enough people, so they ended up dropping out of the competition.
Oh,
But
that's
so
good.
I know all the work that goes in
Yeah.
by the students and by those coaches. So I can't wait to give them some feedback and hope they have a lot of success.
What's that like? How long does something like that last?
It'll be at least, I'd say, 90 minutes or so. So each side has attorneys, they have witnesses. Everybody is acting except the attorneys. So they ask questions, they examine witnesses, make objections, opening statements, closing arguments.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I bet you that's fun. How many kids are normally involved? Like, what's a team look like?
Usually a team is at least a dozen.
Oh, wow.
A dozen high school students.
Wow. Well, good luck tomorrow. That's a lot of pressure on you.
We'll see. I hope to give them some good feedback.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for spending so much time with us this morning. Thanks for doing this because, like I said, this is somewhat rare to interview a judge after the election. So, best of luck. We'll talk to you in what, 10
Thanks,
years?
Frank.
Is that what it is?
10 years. See you
Talk
then.
to you in 10 years. All right. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thanks again to Bryan Maggs. Great to catch up. And I apologize to the viewer who sent in a great question. And I know Bryan is a family court judge, but it would have been a wonderful question. And I apologize, we got lost in the conversation. I didn't look at all the comments that we were getting. But asking the question, this viewer saying, how far can a judge, a New York State judge, for example, interfere with President Trump's administration? That was a great question. I apologize that I missed it. Sometimes I get caught up in the interview and miss some of your questions. But let's read some other comments from viewers. I would ask the president, and if you're just joining us, a viewer sent in what I would ask the president if I was at the press briefing up front, as the legacy media has been pushed to the back of the room. So I'm turning it around on you. What would you ask the president? This viewer said, I would ask the president, if you had Soros all alone in a room, what would you do to him? I agree with you. I'd like to hear that answer. Comment from a different viewer. My mother was a farmer. She tended children during haying, corn, chopping, and milking cows. She bore children and was the hardest worker I ever saw. No proxy needed. Yes, a lot of people are starting to question Representative Anna Paulina Luna. I mean, she left the House Freedom Caucus over this proxy vote, and you can see how it would be misused. And I will say that because for the small window that I worked in Congress, that was during the proxy votes being misused. That was when it was still kind of the tail end of COVID, really over, but people in Congress were misusing it. As someone that had to watch, didn't have to, but watched a lot of C-SPAN during that time, watching how many proxy votes there are and how it was misused. And as that piece said by Carol Swain at the New York Post this morning, saying that people were on vacation, they were at weddings, they were at parties, casting their proxy vote. Now, this instance, it sounds good. It's kind of a good political PR type move, saying that new mothers and or new fathers should be able to vote proxy for, 12 weeks? It sounds good on paper, but it's Washington, and you can see how it'll be misused. And you think of, as this piece kind of, if you read between the lines, they didn't really go into it too deep, but think of what the founding fathers had to go through, whether it was the Constitution, the first Congress, what they had to go through, and the travel that was involved for that to meet in person. This seems like kind of a losing battle, or one that she maybe shouldn't have been so firm on, to quit the House Freedom Caucus and to really disrupt Trump's agenda by now causing a week of no votes. But I would love to hear your thoughts. Okay, I don't know if you're interested in this or not, but I'm going to bring it up quickly. Comedian and longtime Trump critic Bill Maher did visit the White House on Monday and had a private dinner with President Trump. This was initiated by Kid Rock, Rock shared a little bit of his thoughts about the experience. He told Sean Hannity, I think he's going to say nice things about the president. He's not going to have a MAGA hat on, and he's probably not going to vote Republican anytime. But according to Kid Rock, Bill Maher seemed nervous about his first visit to the White House. At one point, Trump asked if he'd like a drink, to which Maher jokingly replied that he'd take a margarita. Trump then had the White House staff prepare one for him. Ultimate Fighting Championship CEO Dana White also attended the dinner. Wow, to be a fly on the wall at that dinner. We basically stuck to the things that we agreed on, Rock said. They both have extremely deep knowledge of American history, both very smart guys, and very reasonable people. Even though they've had this pretty harsh relationship, it was cool. One point of discussion was Trump's past statements about potentially seeking a third term. Rock said Bill Maher raised concerns about the idea, but he declined to divulge details about the conversation. Bill doesn't like it when people are talking about a third term. This, that, and the other. He brought that up. They talked about it a little bit. That was something I would consider private. I feel uncomfortable sharing that. If the president wanted to, he could. Trump had previously said he hasn't explored legal avenues for a third term. We don't need to go into that. But Rock noted that despite their political differences, Bill Maher and Donald Trump found common ground on issues like ending wokeness and securing the border. If they can do it, maybe the family member you have that you disagree with that's dividing you politically, maybe you can go back and be like, hey, man, let's have dinner and talk about what we do have in common, was Kid Rock's final thought on that. Okay, as I mentioned earlier in the program, whether it's Liberation Day and the tariffs or whether it's Doge, the media are kind of latching onto these things in hopes to convince you that the MAGA movement is fading. As Politico, far-left Politico said, Republicans reel as Democrats' overperformance hit a swing state in MAGA country. Democrats clinched a landslide victory in Wisconsin and made inroads in 2 deep red Florida districts, spelling trouble for Republicans. So only outlets like Politico and the kind of legacy media, only outlets like that could tell you that a Republican win in Florida is a bad sign for Republicans. This is typically how the media operates. But on the other side of the coin, when Trump wins the White House, the Electoral College, and the popular vote, when Republicans win the House and the Senate, they say it's not a mandate. Isn't that interesting how definitions change depending on if there's a D or an R next to the name? Republicans emerged from Tuesday's elections on shaky footing. Over the past 10 weeks, President Trump and Elon Musk have worked to hobble the federal government, pummel into submission the country's most powerful independent institutions, and enact a sweeping nationalist agenda with little regard and often disdain for political norms and the Constitution itself. And they've done so with near universal support from the GOP in Washington. Then the voters got the chance to speak. This again coming from Politico, showing you that they again did not learn from November. I'm not going to go through this. Just understand that the concept is that even though Republicans won in Florida, it is a bad sign for Republicans. Or as the Wall Street Journal puts it, the MAGA backlash arrives. Quote, Republicans hold 2 Florida House seats despite a sharp swing to the Democrats. But Democrats easily keep the Wisconsin Supreme Court majority. So again, now the Wall Street Journal painting a Republican win in that special election, painting that as a negative for Republicans. The MAGA majority may have a shorter run than advertised, according to the Wall Street Journal. So winning in the special election is a bad sign for Republicans, that the MAGA agenda the MAGA movement may be. Now I got to quote it exactly because it's so outlandish from the Wall Street Journal, that the MAGA majority may have a shorter run than advertised. Wishful thinking on the media's part, sounds it to me. Oh, and then the propping up of Cory Booker. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio here on Market Street in Corning. Let's go to some viewer comments. This is a nice one saying, good morning, Frank. Have a wonderful day. Well, thank you. Good morning to you, and you have a wonderful day as well. What a nice statement. No, nothing else, just that, and I appreciate it. Very kind of you. Mark writes in, I don't think Musk is going anywhere. I'm glad you brought this up, Mark. I meant to bring it up earlier. We'll get to that next. But I heard through the grapevine he might head NASA. Interesting. That was so overhyped, I didn't think it necessitated a news story. Remember, as a special government employee, I think that's an official term, you only have 130 days where he's illegally allowed to stay in that position. Now, he might be done a little bit shorter than that, but with the way that Teslas have been firebombed, when you have people like Tim Walz gloating over stocks falling, doesn't surprise me he wants to get back to his day job. We'll talk about it here in just a little bit. But comment from a different viewer. Apparently, the leftist media thinks that Republicans are as mindless as their Democrat comrades. Not so. We are not affected by their lies. Here's another example of that. Finally, some fire. Cory Booker's 25-hour speech hits a nerve at home. What if no one listened? Their worry was short-lived. By 11 a.m. on Tuesday, 16 hours after Mr. Booker had begun railing against President Trump's policies, roughly 14,000 callers had left messages on his office hotline. Before he finally stopped speaking, the office had fielded 14,000 more. For 25 hours and 5 minutes, Mr. Booker, who will turn 56 this month, did not sit or exit the Senate chambers to eat or use a bathroom. His speech broke by nearly an hour, a record set 68 years ago by Senator Strom Thurmond. Americans noticed. The social media savvy senator streamed the speech live on his TikTok account, where it garnered more than 350 million likes and more than 110,000 people watching on YouTube when Mr. Booker ended his soliloquy. There we go. In much the same way he began, with an homage to a mentor, John Lewis. Wow, they are writing this in glowing terms. This is the New York Times. Again, I don't think most people knew it was a story until after the fact. And what did it accomplish? We talked about it yesterday. Though I will say one thing that he said I didn't watch it. I did not watch it all. But I thought, you're not going to hear me say this about Cory Booker very often. I thought he made a good point. At one point in this rambling speech, he said, quote, "The Giants and the Jets play in New Jersey. There's only one football team in New York, and that's the Bills." I guess that came up during it at some point. But again, at the end of the day, what did it accomplish? Is this what Democrats are demanding? I know I posed that question yesterday, but they're demanding their representatives, quote, do something. That's the slogan, do something, meaning fight Trump in this resistance. Was that what they were looking for? A speech that did not stop anything, did not stop a nomination, did not stop a vote. It was just a speech to give a speech. So I don't see any real payoff in this. So what is the payoff to those members who are a part of the resistance that want to see their people do something? That's my question. But if you read the New York Times, you would think it was the most historic speech ever given. But as Henry Olsen said, as we talk about this, and they're saying, well, Florida, even though Republicans won, that's a bad sign. Henry Olsen said, break out the big blue hype machine. Democrats and their media allies are swooning over Tuesday's special election results in Wisconsin and in Florida. They're saying this is the start of a turnaround, a sign that people are rebelling against President Trump and Elon Musk. A party badly in need of a jolt got one. And best of all, they got it in the old-fashioned way, by beating up on the big bad orange man. It's a great story. There's only one problem. It isn't true. Oh, it's true that Republican candidates ran well behind Trump in the key races. Florida's two new GOP congressmen, Jimmy Patronis and Randy Fine, won by 14 and 15 percentage points in districts that Trump carried by 37 and 30. Brad Schimmel, the GOP-backed candidate for Wisconsin Supreme Court, also trailed Trump by double digits. Trump carried the Badger State by about a point in 2024, while Schimmel lost by 10. The problem with the Democrats' tale is that they're willfully misunderstood why these outcomes occurred. The Democrat coalition has shifted a lot in the Trump era. The party used to represent less educated voters who were less engaged in politics, while Republicans tilted to the elites. Now that's reversed. Democrats do best with highly educated voters who are highly engaged with politics, the people who vote all the time. Today, it's a GOP coalition that's tilted towards voters who only come out for federal elections. The lower the turnout, the more likely it is that Democrats will overperform compared to their presidential results. The Florida seats are proof of this. And I'm not going to get into all the numbers specifically. This is just getting kind of into the weeds a little bit. But it says here, in 2022, for example, Democrats won 94% of the vote among those who approved of Joe Biden's job performance, only 12% among those who did not. Those figures would produce a good night for Republicans if the midterms were held today. With Trump's 48% job approval and the Real Clear Politics average, 50% disapproval. If those figures hold until November of 2026 and the GOP does as well as Democrats did in 2022, Republicans will get 51% of the House vote and likely retain their slim majority. That would be an historic outcome, and Trump's job approval rating may well decline over the next year and a half. But presidential approval is the number we should be looking at, not special election results. Kool-Aid is a tasty drink. You should have some if you want to quench your thirst on a hot summer's day. Downing it is a bad idea, though, if you're a political analyst or a party strategist. Republicans should resist the temptation to drink the Kool-Aid of electoral despair Democrats are pressing on them and focus instead on keeping the promises that won them the White House. There we go. Oh, even, Charlemagne, he calls himself Charlemagne the God. He is that radio host. He is calling on Democrats to turn to new leaders who fight back, saying House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer should be given the boot. Yeah, Hakeem Jeffries did not have much of a ride before people in his party started turning on him. He has not been an effective leader. He has been really lackluster, especially in the era of Trump. But he said, it's not my job to say that any particular candidate need to be primaried and thrown out of office. But Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer need to be primaried and thrown out of office, he said. He said Schumer is not the man with a plan to fight President Trump. Telling the audience, I'm not too inspired by business casual Morpheus. You take the blue pill, nothing changes. You take the red pill, nothing changes, but with cherry flavor. But then he said, Cory Booker is a Democrat actually doing something. Wow. He's only talking, but he's talking a lot, so I'll take it. Again, what is the success in that? That's so frustrating. Now, he also lauded Jasmine Crockett for her approach. She was recently criticized for referring to Governor Greg Abbott, who is in a wheelchair, as Governor Hot Wheels. I'm not saying Democrats need to be offensive like Trump. Just show any kind of authenticity and fight. Well, I would not say authenticity and Jasmine Crockett go hand in hand if you watch her past videos. But Democrats just need to fight back, whether that looks like filibustering on the Senate floor, rallying across the country, or getting in a roast battle with a wheelchair-bound senior citizen. You got to take that fight. All right, let's take a short break. We will be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street Corning. Couple comments from viewers. Strom Thurmond held the record for Democrats filibustering the civil rights. Now Corey fights against Americans. Thank you very much. Mark writes in, back to the question for Trump. And we pose the question, if you could ask President Trump any question, what would it be? He said, I'd ask him when he sleeps as he's so busy. I know, even if you look at Inauguration Day, I keep going back to that, but I was exhausted watching all the stuff that they were doing, let alone doing it. I know they say that he gets, 4 hours of sleep. I don't even know if that's accurate. That seems a little bit high. Great question. The speech maker, I think this means Cory Booker, is a lunatic. And hopefully the bills will remain in New York, though given the politics of the state, I think the relationship is tenuous. I will say they got the new stadium coming in, so I hope there is some type of long-term. But yeah, Cory Booker, that was one of the things that he said in that it wasn't a filibuster. We got to make that clear. But in his long speech on the floor, that the Bills are the only real New York team. And a comment, how's our buddy, the self-proclaimed super mayor, doing? Not good. She lost that primary. The person she lost the primary to won the mayoral race. So I guess, as far as I know, I don't know if she's still town supervisor of that one area or if we will no longer be. I don't think she's going away completely. I think we will hear from her on other issues, I'm sure, in the future. She said she might look to higher office. So keep that in mind, whatever that means. Now, a couple of quick things. Oh, did you see that on The View? Joy Behar actually asked the question that as Trump's DOJ seeks the death penalty of Luigi Mangione, she actually believes that could lead to a backlash against Republicans. He's very popular, this guy. There could be a backlash. All I'm saying is politically, it could be a backlash against Republicans to give him the death penalty. Everything is looked at of the guise of politics, but isn't that sick to say that an alleged murderer being charged with the death penalty could have some political implications because this guy is quote-unquote liked? Attorney General Pam Bondi said on Tuesday that Thompson's murder was a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination that shocked America. After careful consideration, I have directed federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty in this case as we carry out President Trump's agenda to stop violent crime and make America safe again. Co-host Sonny Hostin suggested that Bondi's efforts were an assault on the process. It just seems like the Attorney General is acting really against our institutional standards, which is what this administration is doing. Elisa Farrah Griffin said, I was a little surprised this is where the Trump Justice Department started. They should have focused on a drug cartel member or human trafficking causes. I personally believe that the death penalty in the most extreme cases, terrorism, mass murder, with the most extensive appeals process in place so that mistakes are not made. I think Luigi Mangione, if convicted, should spend his life in jail. I do not see him as a candidate for the death penalty. He's a first-time offender. He is young, and he is somebody prison systems are meant to rehabilitate and to punish. But of course, looking at it from a political perspective, Joy Behar, that brilliant political mind, saying that this could be a backlash against Republicans over this. Okay. How are we doing on time? Neil Young calls Trump the worst president in the history of our great country, which is interesting. He said our great country, because isn't Neil Young Canadian? He said, when I go to, and you know Neil Young, the music performer, when I go, everybody's so full of themselves. When I go to play music in Europe, if I talk about Donald J. Trump, I may be one of those returning to America who is barred or put in jail to sleep on a cement floor with an aluminum blanket. That is happening all the time now. Countries have new advice for those returning to America. You can read about it at the Canada desk. If I come back from Europe and I'm barred, can't play my USA tour, all of the folks who bought tickets will not be able to come to a concert by me. Maybe we should call for impeachment? Is that what he's suggesting? The ego. The me. Oh, do I have time for this? Let me see. Let me take a short break. We have one... Now we have a couple issues. We're going to read your comments as we wrap up this hour of Frankly Speaking and this edition of Frankly Speaking. So get your last minute comments in. When we come back, a quick local thing. We can talk about this idea that Musk is going to let me do it this way. The clickbait headline. Elon Musk dramatically steps down from Doge in shock move after Trump expressed private doubts. That's coming from the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom. It's not that at all. First of all, there's a 130-day maximum on that. Again, typical of the media. So anyway, get your last minute comments in so I can read them in the next and last segment of today's edition of Frankly Speaking. We will be right back after this. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, wrapping up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Comment from a viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. Yesterday, while I made my occasional visit to Brown Cigar Store, I once again noticed your photo on the wall. Even the people across the street know that you're a rock star. Oh, that's very kind of you to say, but the real rock stars are those at Brown Cigar Store. So thank you for that nice comment, though. Elon Musk's departure from Doge. Now, the left media worked themselves into a lather over Elon Musk's imminent departure from the Department of Government Efficiency. But you've got to remember, and we knew this because we talked about it on the program, that this was always meant to be temporary. He is expected to step back from the administration at the end of next month, but his last day was always imminent. Per federal regulations, which mandate special government employees can only remain at their post for 130 consecutive days. In Musk's case, that would peg his last day at the Doge helm as May 30th, precisely 130 days since Trump's inauguration day. But they're using this as a way to try to attack not just Trump, but Musk, of course, as well. By the way, Doge uncovered the Department of Veterans Affairs. They uncovered that they paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a month for website changes before canceling the contract and having an internal staffer take it over. Good work at the Department of Veterans Affairs, Doge said. VA was previously paying $380,000 a month for minor website modifications. That contract has not been renewed, and the same work is now being executed by one internal VA software engineer spending 10 hours a week. Wow, the money that's being wasted. A comment from a viewer, run for higher office, is she delusional? Yes. I think we've seen in her whole career, talking about Tiffany Henyard there, the self-proclaimed super mayor. That was after she lost her primary and lost it big. She said that she may think about running for higher office and that the politics is not done for her. So yes, I believe delusional is a very appropriate word there, viewer. Thank you very much. Okay. Alleged Las Vegas MS-13 gang leader linked to 11 murders was arrested on Long Island after 4 years on the run, according to the Department of Justice. Trump also has invited the president of El Salvador to the White House, saying, your support of my efforts to combat illegal immigration is greatly appreciated. For far too long, our southern border has been an open door. With the assistance of friends like you, we have made great progress in protecting Americans from illegal border activity. Oh my goodness. Does that do it for today? Oh, by the way, that new book that we keep talking about, Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House, it says that Pelosi secretly tried to prevent Biden from, quote, lowering himself by debating Trump in 2024. Now, that's one of the things coming out in this book, but that's not a surprise. Remember, we predicted that on this program, that we thought they would say to him, make sure you say that you're not going to lower, you're not going to kind of disrespect the office of presidency, that Trump is too aggressive on some issue or whatever the case may be. Maybe one of the insults that Trump used, say that you're not going to stoop to his level and you're not going to debate him. That was my prediction of how they were going to get out of the debate. So it seems like Pelosi was pushing that behind the scenes. Joe Biden wanted to debate really badly. He wanted this fight. He relished it. You've heard Biden before say things like, I want to meet him out behind the schoolyard. He really wanted to debate. Pelosi went to him and tried to play to his ego, saying, you shouldn't lower yourself. You shouldn't lower the presidency to Donald Trump. Even in her mind, she would say to him, don't roll around in the mud. Remember, she hates Donald Trump. She kind of lays it on thick with Biden and says this is going to lower you because she knows that might appeal to him. So keep in mind, when they talk about the scandals and they all try to distance themselves from what is probably the biggest scandal in presidential history, Pelosi, Schumer, Harris, they were all in on it. We knew it. It's just being proven. An ex-Biden aide, Ron Klain, was alarmed by out-of-it president ahead of the disastrous debate. Yeah, but no one said anything. We are out of time. Oh, how cool is it that Musk's last day is on my birthday, May 30th, said this viewer. That is cool. There you are. Something to, I don't know if you want to celebrate that, though. We wish he was around, but we'll celebrate your birthday on May 30th. Have a great day, everyone. This has been Frankly Speaking. Thank you again to Bryan Maggs, Chemung County Court Family Judge, for being our guest. Join us every weekday morning at 6 for Frankly Speaking, only on Big Fox. See you tomorrow morning.